Hello and welcome to Memetic Rhetoric podcast. I'm Alice.
And I'm Mark.
We got the mean boys. Let's fucking go!
I'm pretty excited. It's been a while. All right. So what have we been doing since the last time we had a podcast? I can kind of catch everybody up to what I've been doing.
That would be great. I'd love to hear what you've been up to.
What I've been up to is I had a lot of housing issues. I had some personal issues that I was going through. Didn't have a lot of time to do podcasting, but a quick summary would be that I left a pretty difficult relationship I was in, and after that, I spent a little bit of time kind of figuring out where I was going to live. I briefly considered living in an abandoned Target building, but instead I recorded a power electronics album inside that building.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, it was... it's pretty good. It's on my Bandcamp, and I'll give the link to that later.
Isn't it just deadiverson.bandcamp.com, or is it something else?
It's deadiverson.bandcamp.com. That is where the album is. It's under a different artist handle, Meth in June, which is what I'm going to be using for my noise and power electronics projects in the future. Everything else, pop music, industrial music, is going to be under Dead Iverson, so I've split my projects a little bit. Besides that, I mean, it's really quite a blur, what I've been doing. I'm currently working on an album of, I don't know, it's kind of sample-based industrial music. And there's a lot of songs that are based around using the modern warfare gun sound effects and explosion sound effects as drums that I was using. I was using the project as a way to learn GarageBand on iOS on my phone because I didn't have a lot of time to do music on my laptop.
All right.
So, I mean, I would say things have calmed down a bit. I'm interested in doing more podcasts with you, Alice, and getting back into working on projects rather than running around the city at night trying to figure out where I'm going to sleep. And in terms of what you've been doing since we last had a podcast episode, what have you been getting involved in?
Well, as a lot of you know, I stay home every day, collecting a fat government check because they think I'm too crazy to be out in public trying to work.
Are you?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I want to contribute, and I'm trying. If you'd let me finish.
All right, I'm gonna let you finish.
I love being sassy with you because that's the whole point of having a co-host, right? I've been working on some AI chatbots. I downloaded an application called Faraday.dev. I think the dev might be silent because that's how website apps are, but the point is, that's the website. You go to it, you can find some of my stuff. I've been getting really into AI lately. I have a fat GPU.
Yes.
It has many flops. Many floating point operations. I'm hella compute up
you
in
have
here.
Way more flops than I've ever seen in my life.
So many flops. I got that FP64 on fleek.
I don't know what that means, but I think it's great.
Yeah, hella. But so I got this. I started a company called Promptress LLC, like last May or April. I don't know. The IRS will tell me one day. And I wanted to do AI consulting and prompts and stuff and do things. And I wanted to have some intellectual property that wasn't like connected to me that I could like do stuff with. So I started saying AI chatbots on this Faraday thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've been wanting to make some AI chatbots for a while because like as a child, I used to have hundreds and dozens of accounts, sock puppets, and have all these different personalities that were fragmented and whatever, and it was against the rules back then to have all those accounts and talk to each other and pretend to be other people.
Sure, today you can just do it pretty much all you want, but back then it was a lot more tricky, socially especially.
Well, I mean, like I would get, in trouble.
Right.
And then, trust and safety people would put me on their lists and whatever, and they would have like a plan on how to deal with people like me. I'm the reason a lot of rules exist for certain companies, probably.
Yeah.
The point is, I've been doing stable diffusion locally, and some of the prompts I was doing gave me some ideas.
Okay.
You've seen the film Perfect Blue before. where it's the J-pop idol. She quits singing, becomes a actress, and her fans are upset. One of her fans is upset about it, and that's kind of the premise of the movie without spoiling too much.
Yeah, it's an animated film from Japan.
The way a J-pop idol talks is in the press release has a very certain or very specific quality to it that I can't put much of a word on, because that's kind of the point of using that term qualia anyway, right?
Yes.
But I generated like an image of like, you know, some Japanese girl. I used a lot of like old 90s city pop vibes and some stuff, and it's anime and sakura blossom or cherry blossoms or whatever. And I wrote this fan letter like, "Hi fans, sorry I'm quitting acting. I hope that I can change the world with my acting." And you know, it's very like I wanted to I made ChatGPT generate this breakup letter, and then I generated like an image, and then I wanted to make a full blown chatbot where you could be the head of a J-pop city pop singer's former city pop idol singer person who's becoming an actress, and give her a backstory, and basically you're the head of her English speaking fan club and can ask her anything. And so I've like kind of experimented making my first little like fake person, and it's heavily nuanced. It's very Alice. Like this is like, oh, this is something Alice would make.
Totally.
Like it's not like supposed to be pervy. It's just supposed to be like very nuanced. Like you're not gonna see a lot of I don't know what you're gonna see a lot of in the future. We're gonna see a whole lot of things, hopefully. But I did that, and I'm doing one that's a little bit more futuristic, maybe based off more of a Macross type futuristic space idol type thing. And been messing around with some of the meta AI bots, playing RPG with Snoop Dogg, like an archer or something. But I hope to like make more fake people for people to interact with, because I love talking to people, but I don't like actually talking to people. I mean, you're cool, but there's something interesting as you get older about this idea of automating the things you do, or like I can't have offspring, so like when I make a chatbot, it's almost like I get to section off a piece of myself and put it out there that anyone can interact with indefinitely.
Yes.
With my arbitrary set of instructions.
I would say the city pop idol. It's pretty retro in concept, but futuristic in implementation. That's something that's kind of the times now, I think.
Yeah, I've been following this group on Twitter a lot lately. That two groups. There's 21E8 and Milady.
Yeah.
And they're both kind of crypto / new internet / network spirituality / computational personality traits type. It's a whole beautiful princess disorder. I'm neither left wing or right wing. I have angel wings, and I descend into space when I don't remember the rest. But
I'm familiar with Milady because of there was a bit of a scandal online. I think it was last year before about the Milady creator and the Kali Yuga movement. But
yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I've heard some things about that, but I haven't like looked into it. I don't own any Milady stuff. I might have minted one of Charlotte Fang's articles about cancel culture. But I think it's called "The Cancelled Will Inherit the Earth." But it's these people have a lot of interesting things to say, and it's like I think it's important if you're following internet culture like we do here at Memetic Rhetoric to at least follow some of these circles.
Yeah, and the scandal was more of a social media sort of conversation than it really was an examination of exactly what the Milady. I mean, there was sort of an economic, a sort of capitalist conversation about like, is it exploitative? Are they scamming people? Are they Nazis? And it sort of shrouded a lot of what was actually going on there. So I think that even if there's an internet conversation about how bad something is, there's still value in examining what is actually happening there,
right?
Without immediately jumping to conclusions about the meaning or significance socially around it.
Mm.
So I think that's good. That's cool that you're involved there. You don't need to care about the scandal in order to.
Well, I don't participate in that community, but I do watch and sometimes like those people who have Milady PFPs follow me.
Yeah,
and I follow them back, but I don't really. I'm not one of them, but like I feel like I agree with a lot of some of the things that they espouse as far as like the way that they treat the internet now.
Yeah, I don't think it's like observation of a community. I don't agree that it's complicitness in.
I have a lot of free time.
Yeah, right.
So to observe.
Exactly.
Um,
So I just wanted to add that,
that's cool.
in case anybody got immediately up in arms about hearing about Milady,
Well, I know that a lot of things have different drama, especially in the crypto scene, because everyone's just people will just assume anything negative you say about anything crypto, and I have to like take a lot of it with a grain of salt. So I
Yeah.
don't know what people believe. I guess I forgot about it until recently,
It's a big obstacle
a couple of years ago. But
to people really understanding what's going on there. Is that there's scandal before?
it's just people trying to have fun on the internet.
Yeah, like always.
Just
Oh, I wanted to ask you about the Unreal Engine marketplace.
I haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah, I know. That's why I wanted to ask you about
Okay,
it.
so back on the AI topic.
Yeah.
Stable Diffusion recently came out with something called Stable Audio.
Yeah.
And they let me do up to 1 minute and 30 seconds of audio. And I've had Unreal Engine downloaded on my excuse me, on my computer for a hot minute now, and I've been too mentally deficient to figure out how to use it. However, recently I figured it out, and when I have the access to this stable audio thing that lets me make like 100 tracks for like 100 credits,
Wow.
or whatever,
Yeah.
I can fill up an entire like concept. Unreal Engine Marketplace, by the way, is Unreal Engine's an engine for people who make video games and 3D things. Some people use it for virtual spaces, some people use it for video games, some people use it for their music videos. It's just you can drop 3D assets in it and it uses C++, and you can just do a whole lot of stuff with it. It's like Unity or Godot or whatever.
Sure, you could use it for animation, games, all kinds of media projects.
And there's a store where there's asset plugins. And I've always wanted to have, ever since I got spoiled with having my music in Rock Band 3, which I won't shut up about.
Well, it's cool.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. It's cool that happened.
But I wanted to make a music audio asset pack, but the whole music making aspect thing has been really hurting my head since you fall out of practice with it.
Yes.
But when the AI comes along, and I have my brain's easier at coping with prompting than it is actual music making.
Yes.
I can be like, okay, I can type in a prompt, aleatoric, RNG generated, mixolydian to diminished fifths, 145 BPMs to 174 BPMs, maddening, dissonant, glass shattering, and I get something out of it, and I can do tons of that, and make like 5-second clips, 7-second clips, 1.5 minute clips, organize it, put together, slap it in Unreal Engine, click a few buttons, have it compatible, upload it to the store, tell them I'm a person with, verify myself or whatever.
Right.
And then be like, I want to sell this for $25 and tell people I have music assets up there and they can use for their games. Because if the AI audio thing, if you're a pro user, they let you use it commercially. And Epic has always been much better than Steam about accepting AI stuff.
Yeah.
So like I can click made with AI, and there's like no on the tags for my product, and like there's no deception about it. People know what they're getting.
Of course.
And yeah, you can go on Unreal Engine Marketplace right now and type in Strange Sounds Volume 1, and you'll get my asset pack with a very poorly Mid-Journey. I know there's a comp on. I forgot about that. I saw it on Rate Your Music after. That's totally different, but it's also a bootleg comp, so it's okay to take the name. But I didn't know about it at first. But I think it's okay, right? Is that what you're gonna say?
I was going to add something about the entire concept of what you're doing.
Okay.
I was going to bounce off of that.
Okay, fine.
AI generated art is pretty controversial right now. I hate that word even, but just people seem to be kind of against it. And
you don't like controversy?
I love it personally, but the word pisses me off because it reminds me of like Jerry Springer.
Yeah, he's dead.
He is dead,
Grow up.
which is not controversial at all. But what I wanted to say was what I like. I wanted to say something positive about.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Because there's a lot of people who are saying that like it sucks and
Floor is yours.
and it's stealing. But I was going to compare it to when I'm making noise in my software, my goal is usually to create something that I don't know what's going to happen when I start working on a patch or I start working on a song. And I think the cool thing about AI prompt music is that you don't know what's going to happen when you put the prompts together. You're trying to sort of, well, we like to use the word nudge. You're trying to nudge the software into producing something interesting.
I'm prompting it.
Yeah, you're prompting it to create something, and the outcome is, it's exciting because you don't know exactly what's going to happen.
Well, I've always been fascinated with tech.
Yes.
But programming languages have always been elusive to me because it's hard work to learn. Even the easier ones just hurt my brain. But English and writing also hurts my brain, but hurts my brain less than trying to learn Python by myself.
Comes more naturally. Yeah.
And I have some classical training, more classical training on English than I do programming languages.
Right.
Like when I got a A in comp sci, it was like 2005, and we had an intro test that asked very basic questions, and I didn't really want to go into that field. But the point is, I can program in English. I can make music in English. And I don't mean like spoken word, like using words. I mean, I can...
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, you do, but does the audience? Ooh. When I say in English, I don't mean like in the English language as opposed to like a different language. I mean, I can be like, I want aleatoric music with guitars. I want to hear this sound. I want to evoke this vibe. I can describe it. I don't know how to make it. I'm too poor to hire a symphony or get Benjamin Britten in here or Michael Babbitt or George Crumb or whoever. I'm going to keep name dropping like, you know, Christoph Penderecki or whatever. You know, is he even alive still? I want to see him. Come to Seattle again. Okay, point is, I can type in aleatoric nonsense, RNG generated, all the prompts. I wouldn't be able to do what you do in your setup the way you do it.
Right.
And that's fine. But just because I do it differently doesn't mean it's like not music or it's not art. It's just made differently.
I agree.
And like every time the new technology comes out, whether it's synthesizers or vocoders or Vocaloid or Autotune,
yeah,
or MIDI,
right. I mean, what I would say is like the pushback against this kind of thing. I feel like people, it's almost like there's a certain like boundary of automation that people are comfortable with that they didn't realize they were comfortable with. And that's always, that goalpost has always been moving as technology progresses.
I feel like we need some Ludditism to cause some tension to motivate people who are really serious about it to create.
Sure.
But yeah, other than that, I find a lot of it to be very unendearing because it's like the fifth time I've seen people get upset about some new technology.
I mean, some people are still upset about the idea of people using like laptops to make music. Which is a little bit ridiculous.
Did we talk about this already? Like when I was growing up, like Merzbow had just started making music with a laptop, and like everyone on the SoulSeek chat rooms, noise rooms, were like, "Oh, you still listen to Merzbow? He uses a laptop. He sucks now." Like people are like really upset about people using laptops to make noise.
Yeah,
like people are probably still a little elitist about it, but like I was there when like people really started getting upset about it. When like laptops became more ubiquitous, and FL Studio, Fruity Loops, and Orion, and
sure,
Renoise were coming on the scene, Cakewalk and all that, you know?
Yeah, but none of that automation made producing music any easier. If anything, it made it more complex because the limitations were lifted. And when limitations are lifted, the more options you have, the more difficult it actually is to figure out what the fuck you're doing. And I feel like that's, with the AI-generated prompts and things for art, the reason why I think people are finding them distasteful is because people still don't really know how to use them yet in a way that's, you know, creative. A lot of the time, they're seeing pretty uncreative work come out of the way people are using these tools because it's just still very new.
Well, not only is it new, it's also we're at that stage where, okay, you know, a lot of artists use stencils and trace other art and stuff, right?
Yes.
Like to get when they were getting started, or like other authors would write fan fiction to get their start.
Yes, and this was
a lot of AI art. You start. It's supposed to be you start with a prompt, you get like an image, and then you use your artist skills to touch it up and make it better. So you don't have to start from scratch every time you want to make something.
Or recontextualize.
Yeah.
recontextualize it, put it into artistic context.
Right.
Which is the same as, it is very much like stenciling in that sense.
Because there's a lot of people who are like say it's stealing because it's like trained off of like whatever, and I'm like, well, the way the data works is we're trying to model how actual learning works in the brain, right? So like you go outside and see and listen to a whole bunch of music, and you sleep at night, and you train your brain does all the subconscious stuff, and you wake up the next day and make art. Are you stealing because you went out and listened and experienced all these experiences and then recontextualized it into your own creation? The computer can do that now too, and we're all scared of that, and I get it, but stop.
Yeah, there is that famous line about art, the cliche about art that applies to that, you know. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you. I don't use the tools, but I don't see them as profane in the way that a lot of people feel like they're profane. And speaking of those tools, I think you used some of those tools to create a song recently.
Yeah, there's a Grimes released a on her website, Elf Tech released a voice print of her voice.
Yes.
Made by Trinity Studios, I believe. I'll link them in the bio, but I have a new track called Thermodynamic Goddess. It just released recently, and it's a song where I have her shouting out work in the background. And the Thermodynamic Goddess is a play on words because there's this new accelerationist movement called effective accelerationism.
Yes.
Where essentially the idea is, it's kind of complicated. Well, it's not really that complicated, but it's effectively a tech bro solar cult.
Okay.
Where they worship acceleration as thought and the idea that, God, I sound ridiculous.
It's okay.
I have it on my profile. But when trying to explain it in like words that make sense, it's hard for me. But it's entropy, right? So like a lot of acceleration things, it's like you have the different sections where it's acceleration at all costs, acceleration controlled, and then you have like effective accelerationism where it's like keep generating as much energy as possible. Be like the sun.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of like solar stuff in it. It reminds me of a lot of like polemic stuff, to be honest. And I think some of its inspiration comes from Nick Land, but they'll get mad at you if you say that. I've sat in a lot of their spaces, and they also get mad if you like try to explain it. They have a wiki, you can look it up. He
was pretty inspirational to a lot of stuff that, you know, it's just sort of causative. Not necessarily that they're citing Nick Land as all of his ideas, but
well, I mean, you know, some of these, you know, trends come from somewhere.
Correct.
And he definitely started a handful.
Sure. But in terms of the AI that you were using to make the song, you said that you used the word work.
Yeah. So the idea is for the song, the ad copy I've been using is the idea is you're God's battery. You're You're a worker for the thermodynamic goddess. You're God's battery. You're supposed to rise above the noise and build. You're supposed to take. It's like kind of an alchemical. Oh, I don't sound ridiculous. It's supposed to be this sort of chaotic, dissonant noise track.
Yes.
But it's also about work and producing and doing something creative with your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a play on the thermodynamic god that in the EAC, the effective accelerationist movement. So I'm trying to kind of make this motivational track for all the weirdo EAC people out there that are into this sort of music to convince them that you can rise above the noise and build. Because a lot of it's about building AI and contributing to a whole lot of human betterment and stuff.
A little bit anthemic, but the anthem is work.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds good.
Building and contributing and just, you know, generating heat.
Right, which is what we do constantly. I think there was another AI tool that you were working with as well. Is there like a final one that you wanted to comment on?
Have you heard of ChatGPT? I use it a lot.
Most people have heard of ChatBeat. Okay.
Okay, so the Meta Quest.
I have heard of ChatGPT. I think a lot of people have. It's one of those things in the news now, but go ahead.
Well, I use it a lot, but that's not what I was gonna. That's not the other AI thing I've been using more.
Okay.
I have a VR headset called the Quest 2, and they're announcing the Quest 3, and they announced a whole bunch of AI stuff for it.
Yeah.
And there's a metaverse 3D space thingy they have called Horizon Worlds, and I have space in it for the Shame Soiree, my personal side. It's not even a side project. It's not even a side project. It's like when Scarlet Death Alice makes something, and it's content, and it's not like main page stuff, like it's a blog article or like a whatever. It goes on my Shame Soiree thing, and it's part of this whole existential.
Part of a cloud.
It's because there's like I have Death OS, which is like my personal stuff. Then I have like my content arm, and all the content goes on one page, and then like Death OS is just like, okay, you're paying me for things versus you're paying for my like products.
Yeah, you have a platform, and
Right.
and there's your music project, and you also have a cloud of content around that.
Right.
I understand.
Okay. So I have a VR space now called
Okay.
Shane Soiree, and I released it. And on the Meta Connect event the other day, they announced they were going to allow AI to occur in Horizon Worlds at some point in the future. So I haven't started anything because I don't have access to it yet. Hopefully, they will give me access to the AI stuff in Horizon Worlds soon. Who knows? But I'm really looking forward to filling up my virtual world with virtual characters and creating my own little virtual spaces full of AIs, because they're letting you basically like put AIs into your virtual spaces, and you can like make entire worlds sitting in your VR headset that people can interact with.
I would say that so far AI has seemed to be pretty unimpressive in terms of the creative output.
Because you need real schizos like me pushing stuff through.
This is exactly what I was going to say, is that these tools deserve better creative minds plugging shit into them than what we've gotten so far.
Well, the issue is a lot of people are really overly concerned about something called safety and alignment and ethics, and I am also concerned about that. But I don't have to kowtow to anyone else's bottom line. I have the freedom to create, but I also might not always have the mental capacity to do so. But I try, and hopefully I get access so I can keep doing stuff. But that's what the Faraday.dev stuff is kind of doing for me. Where I can like write it on my own and upload it. I want to get weird with it. No one's really getting weird. Everyone's doing stuff to make money, which is fine. You know, go get it. But
what it reminds me of, this was an earlier podcast topic, is early internet, like Web 2.0. There was a similar rush to make a lot of money off of it when it first started. The dot-com bubble, I mean, it sort of makes sense that a Web 3.0 would have its own Web 3.0 bubble.
Yeah.
And then it moved on to people. I mean, there were weird websites early on in Web 2.0, but people didn't really get into that on any larger scale with, famous websites that you could go to and see something really freaky or just creative stuff until much later. And that's kind of what I think's happening right now, is the first people on the scene, they know how to use the tools, but they're probably not the most interesting or creative minds that could actually put some weird, freaky content in there.
Half the reason Web 3 was like that is because when you're designing basically an operating system designed for modular money from the ground up over like 15 to 20 years or however long it's been, since the idea is kind of like, because like Bitcoin wasn't really the first, but it was kind of the kickstarted a lot of things.
Right.
But it was basically like starting an operating system with DLC built into it.
Yes.
And the purpose was to have get away from the dollar and Visa and MasterCards and do your own sort of like, we got operating systems for money now. Cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, with VR and AI, definitely everyone's like, we got to jump on this quick, because everyone knows, there's PR and stuff. There's this hype cycles, and there's the ways to You got to be first. You got to do this. And if you're a big company, you have the money to take longer and do something real with it. But I'm on SSI. I don't have to rush anything. That also means I have trouble getting stuff done. Maybe that's the problem with like UBI and like social services. That's why quality stuff doesn't come from people like me. The weird stuff that motivates other people to make money. Like the necessary weirdness, I guess.
I mean, you just have other obstacles. I think you're doing your best to find the various different inroads.
Yeah. So, have you listened to anything, any music, or seen any TV or anything lately?
Yeah. Briefly, there's a band called Haunted Horses. They're a local band in Seattle that they have a really sort of like oppressive, sort of industrial sound, but they're also, I would say they sound sort of like has a sort of like apocalyptic, very heavy noise rock sound, but like the rhythm section's industrial. I was listening to them. They have several albums on Spotify. They're good. But mostly, I got a new laptop and I was playing Disco Elysium pretty late, kind of late to the game on that. But I've been appreciating the game for being very small scale in terms of role playing. There's a lot of new role playing games that come out. They're very big scale, grand sweeping stuff or open world. It's been very popular. But Disco Elysium, the main things I would say I appreciate about it are that it focuses on a very small story, almost mundane, and most of the game is you talking to yourself, which I think is pretty relatable.
Well, the narrator.
Yeah, the narrator of the game is the character that you play. Everything about the game is focused around your internal dialogue between different parts of your body and mind, and the way that you construct your character or role play is based around how to the forefront, like weak or strong, different parts of the human experience are. That ranges from like your intuition to how well you can keep your poker face, that kind of thing. It's pretty interestingly set up, and I'm enjoying it a lot. And it's kind of a meme, I think, the game about how you can be a communist and be a fascist and stuff like that. But mostly, I appreciate the way that the game is just focuses on the mundane human dramas that come up when something tragic happens and figuring out how to resolve the ripple effect that tragedy has in like a community. It's good. I think that's pretty much it. How about yourself?
Speaking of local bands, there's one band I really like, called Undulation.
I haven't heard of them.
It's from the person who did Explorist. They're this like blackened death metal band.
Oh.
And they're really good. But the lead singer does like jewelry, has like an interesting like hand armor thing they made. I'll have to show it to you later, I guess. But it's like, it looks like it's straight out of Lord of the Rings, and it's brutal.
Whitesmithing, they call it.
Yeah. And I think they had like an album come out recently, but I saw them at Belltown Yacht Club the other day, and that was pretty rad.
I'll have to check them out.
But I've also listened to, there's a new album out by a band called Blind Equation. I believe they're Cybergrind or Nintendo Core, but some Japanese accounts were talking about the album and being like, this is really cool, it reminds me of like Nintendo Core. I really like it. I haven't listened to a lot of Cybergrind in my life, but I've listened to enough to know that this is probably my album of the year. It's just the bleeps and bloops just really like make my synapses explode in a way that hasn't happened in a long time.
Yeah, it's a pretty amorphous genre. There's a lot of things that can fall under cybergrind. It's not very well defined. It's like internet music, kind of hard, sort of new metal inspired internet music.
There's been a lot of cybergrind coming out this year, actually, from the big money cybergrind people and some other record labels and stuff. But like Bajalvin had a music video come out, and like it was cool. I like the video and I like some of the stuff. Just there's a lot of good music in that those circle of people, like White Corset and like 32-bit horror and
Yes.
all those kinds of people that all like or hang around each other on Twitter. I don't know.
Void Dweller.
Or X.com. I don't know that person.
They're all friends of mine on social media.
Is anyone really? It's
Parasocial.
okay.
Parasocial, quote unquote friend.
So yeah, I've been listening to some of that.
Sure.
I don't really follow new music as much as I should. Like there was a new Ash and Ego album that came out, and I think that might have been it.
Okay.
I'm seeing her play live hopefully at the end of the month. There's a new Star Wars. There's always a new Star Wars or Marvel show, and none of them have been really that like talk worthy to talk about today. But while we're recording this, the most recent one is called Star Wars Ahsoka.
Yeah.
And it's the Darth Vader guy used to be Anakin Skywalker. And have you seen Star Wars?
I have seen Star Wars.
Okay, I don't know your story. All right.
My story is I've seen Star Wars.
So, Clone Wars, they remade it as a CGI show, and it was canon, and it was Dave Filoni and like George Lucas doing it together, and they fleshed out the Clone Wars way more out of like 7 seasons, and Luke Skywalker has an apprentice, or Anakin Skywalker has an apprentice, and it's this Ahsoka character, and she's like this young girl with like the weird head dress, not a dress, but it's like I forget the race her character is, but she's very distinct looking.
Twi'lek, like she has the
no, it's tendrils? A different. It's not a tentacle.
Oh, it's a different.
But it's a different
species.
Sort of
sure.
head mechanism.
Okay.
That's organic and not a headdress, but it looks like it. Everyone mistakes it for a headdress.
Okay.
And this show takes place after the Clone Wars and after another CGI show that's canon called Star Wars Rebels. And so you start watching Star Wars Ahsoka, being like, okay, cool. There's this character that I've never heard of. If you haven't seen if you were smug like I was up until the pandemic, and hadn't seen Clone Wars or Rebels, you won't know who Ahsoka is, and you won't know who any of these Star Wars Rebels characters are or why they're important. And if you haven't played the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order games that are also apparently canon, you won't understand hardly any of the stuff going on in this show.
Relatable.
And it's really good if you know all of this stuff, but they almost expect you to be like really into it. It's just there's a certain point where it's like, how much of this do
I would say Star Wars is a lot of homework at this point. If you want to really get into some of the IPs, not IPs, the individual like stories.
But it's interesting, but it's just like I want to see where it ends because I want the lore now because you get like there's so much homework and you get addicted to the homework, and that's what they get you is the connecting the dots, and it becomes its own. They don't even have to like do arcs anymore for stuff. They just make it so lore heavy and nostalgia heavy that you just have to do all the work on your own to figure out what the alien language in the background was and what it relates to and to this game, and then the reference in this game is a reference to this and this is a reference to that, and it's just this metacontextual stuff that is just fascinating. And there's a word for all that nostalgia stuff, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's the color grading could be better.
The color grading could
murky.
be better. Yeah.
I don't know if that's because the CGI sets they're doing now, but it looks like it feels like it's they're trying too hard to make it look like Star Wars Rebels or like a CGI show that like wouldn't have good color grading in the first place. But
almost like a retro look, but it's not going retro enough.
I guess you could say that.
It's like retro to something very recent.
I don't know.
They're trying to make it look like something.
I feel like if I'm going to complain about the color grading, it should be able to like use more words for it. But just something doesn't feel right. And I'm not sure if it's because like a lot of other Star Wars stuff looks brighter and deep, like the colors look deeper.
Yeah.
So, and color grading usually is supposed to tell a story of like, because if you're ever study color grading, they'll tell you to use these sets of colors for this mood and these sets of colors for that mood.
Yes.
So when you notice this is kind of like a washed out vibe, you're like, okay, well, what does that mean?
What's the tone?
And when it's Star Wars, you're like, okay, really, what does this mean?
Sure. I can see.
And if you start to think, especially with Star Wars or Disney, I guess in general these days, like, okay, is this if you start to like lean towards this as an accident, that like makes you not like the show, because like you're too brainworm to like dislike it for any other reason. Because if it's lore, it's like, yeah, I'm lore whore. But if it's like on accident, I don't know. Like I even forgave the Jack Black episode of Mandalorian with that's Lizzo in it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, do you remember? You can. Right. It's a great example. You can remember how. My only thought on this is I really wish they actually. I really wish they actually had put the Backstreet Boys, or no, was it NSYNC or the Backstreet Boys, into the first three Star Wars films.
I don't know.
There's a plan to do it, and I actually really wish they had done it because those films are already what they are. Putting the '90s boy band into it, I think really would have added something to what those films are.
Did Lance Bass not make an appearance?
I don't remember, but I think he was not in it.
Okay.
And then you were showing me Cyberpunk earlier.
Yeah, it was. Oh yeah, Cyberpunk. I think we talked about this. We talked about how they make bad games.
Yes.
Just for their redemption arcs in like an earlier episode.
Yes.
But what I want to talk about with you today is RTX and like DLSS and DLAA, which is ray tracing, dynamic learning super sampling, dynamic learning anti-aliasing. And so the old way of doing graphics is really like computationally expensive. Because you want to like render it as high as possible, get all the frame rates, really pump the juice, right?
Yes.
But with the newer way that they're making games, with the ray tracing, the Vulkan and DX12 stuff, you can, especially with DLSS,
yes,
which they use a lot for the dynamic learning super sampling, you can render these games that would be otherwise really computationally intensive at lower resolutions, and then just use machine learning to upsample them. So you're like doing on the fly upscaling. Like you go on piracy sites, right, and like downloaded old movies that will say upscale on it, and you're like, this looks okay.
Officially, no, I don't.
Or you've like downloaded Topaz, and done it yourself for like your archive before, probably.
Oh, all the time.
And it's like, okay, cool, this is an AI upscale. I don't really understand what this means or why it looks better. But when you have a graphics card that has dedicated chips for upscaling, what this means is that they can make these games flashier and better and more fun and more realistic without having to really put more GPUs in people's hands. You put more of these like AI chips in people's hands that will just do all the upscaling for you, and you can have really like games that are easier to run instead of having to like start putting. Everyone won't have to like you won't have to like keep buying expensive stuff as often because you'll just be able to upscale it. Because like the idea is that we give all of our silicon to the government to help run their simulations, while we get stuck with crappy silicon with our AI upscaling or our cloud compute with like Xbox Game Pass and GeForce Now.
Right. Because we just play little video games with it, and they play video games with our lives.
It's like Ender's Game or something.
It's a lot like that book, Ender's Game or something. I mean, what it reminds me of is when I want to make like an album cover, or I want to make some sort of graphic, and I'm looking for photos online to manipulate. I find photos online, but the photos are at a really tiny resolution, and I want to make something that's big. And when I try to do that, when I increase the size of the photo, it looks like absolute shit because I can't fill in the information that's not there on my own. But the machine learning can do that. So you could take a very small photo, like a tiny, tiny little piece of art that you find online, and then you can increase the size of it, and the machine learning can fill in the missing information, and it looks, the way you want it to.
one of my browsers had an update recently that lets you upscale things that are in 480 videos that are in 480p up to 720p. I think.
Yeah.
Maybe it even does 720p to 1080. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at it in a while, but because like Chrome Canary will do one, and Edge Canary will do another version. They all implement it differently, but it's the same library. And I can like save so much bandwidth watching porn all day at lower resolutions. And if I'm using no bandwidth, that means that all of the other people who need to use it for capitalism and important stuff can use the bandwidth instead.
Yeah. It's a neat shortcut, I think.
Yeah.
It's cool.
So for today's topic, we're talking about something called cognitive security, which is essentially one's capacity for being able to maintain their own thoughts as their own.
Yeah. It's not exactly a new idea, but it's
Is it like internet security? But like for your brain?
It's similar. I mean, security is protecting yourself from something.
It's like psychic self-defense.
Yeah. And if you're talking about cognitive security, you're talking about keeping the way that you think safe from outside influences, damage, danger, or infection. And this is sort of relevant to older ideas, like, for example, propaganda or counter-propaganda. It was probably be the 20th century version.
So originally this theme was going to be called How to Make Your Own PSYOP. But we changed it into cognitive security because instead of telling people how to make their own PSYOP, we want to tell people how to protect themselves against PSYOPs. Because talking about PSYOPs and mental stuff can get kind of tricky sometimes.
It's inherently tricky because the brain is I mean, I don't know how you feel about this statement, but the brain is a black box. The way that we observe our own cognition, we can only do so from inside that system. Like, our cognition is observing our own cognition. We don't really know how the brain works. So it all is pretty touch and go as far as understanding what's going on. You have to base all of your own assumptions and observations about the way that your brain is working and how you're thinking on evidence that is produced and observed by your brain at the same time. So, but there's still things you can do.
There's when I was getting my public relations degree,
yeah,
a lot of things we studied was like in marketing was trying to like for convincing a customer they needed something they didn't realize they needed and making them think it was their idea.
Mm-hmm.
And we had all these data points on them on how to kind of figure out what they would want without them realizing we were the ones giving them what they wanted or that they even wanted it.
Okay.
And we would fill in the gaps where there might otherwise be noise. Where the brain, I don't know where we're talking about anymore. But the point is,
I would say use the term data points. So
yeah.
specific data points about that person that can be exploited for whatever you want.
Mm.
Like, an example of a data point would be aspects of your personality, economic status. It could be, I mean, almost anything that can be measured or observed about that person. But there's certain ones that are probably more vulnerable or that stand out more than others.
Right.
We're talking about a marketing perspective. There's the demographic data about that person. There's things like, well, when it comes to today's technology, you're talking about your personal data. That's not just like the websites you visit. That's almost literally anything you do.
Well, everything is kind of designed to sell you more stuff. And the way, when I say like everything's a data point, it's almost like the entire connected world is its own focus group,
Yes.
like data, everything's data. So when you copy and paste some words into Google Keyboard, or you say something in front of your mic, your smart device the microphone on your smart device,
Mm-hmm.
someone at the NSA might not be like listening to you, but like the fact you said tomato and smoothie and rabbit ears would go into a database somewhere, and they would extrapolate that on everyone you've hung out with, everyone your phone has been next to, everyone you've spent a certain amount of time with, everyone that you've been on like a Facebook Messenger with, or whatever, or other messenger that sells data. And I don't know who sells data, but it all kind of comes together and it tells a story. And that story might not be your story. And that's where I think cognitive security comes in, is because the whole of society is about trying to push things on you to make the economy happen.
Correct.
Right, and it has to keep happening. It's all like a giant, like we were talking about earlier. You got to generate heat, and someone has to sit down and figure out how do we keep doing that safely.
Yeah.
And so they try to learn as much about you as you can, and you don't really realize that everything's being used to make you do something, and you think it's all your idea.
Yeah, the NSA is a good example because what intelligence constituted even just a few decades ago has dramatically changed. I mean, the NSA once upon a time, or intelligence agencies and things like that, were like wartime agencies that were used to collect data on groups or individuals that were supposed to be a national security threat. But at this point, the computational power that exists just literally all around every human being and every device and all things being interconnected, that reaches back to, the NSA as an example, an organization that's kind of has a lot of access to all of that happening at once.
Well, it's kind of like when people used to say like I've been listening to the wires or like whatever.
Sure.
It's almost like everything is part of that now.
Yes.
So like even though like someone might not be listening, the data's listening.
What you have is a vast amount of computational power and a vast amount of measuring devices everywhere. And the NSA doesn't have to sit around and manually listen to anything anymore. They have systems that take any particular keyword, or data point is really almost anything, but keywords are a good example because I think they're still relevant. Like,
what's your favorite keyword?
Keyword is probably my favorite keyword.
Interesting.
I like the way it sounds.
It's a good word.
But yeah, I'm being extra meta there because the topic is very meta.
Hella.
Yeah, but what you were saying about the story is that if you take all of that measured data, all that compiled data, and all that computational power, you throw it all together, and you have a massive sort of human story. You have sort of a massive human drama happening in this computational data sense. What an organization can do, or any particular person who can tap into that can do, is they can take that and they can further process it using that computational power to create and to extrapolate possibilities from matching everything up. Neural networks are essentially that, right? It's pattern seeking, pattern computing tools or systems. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's just a bunch of connections.
It's literally, AI is we don't have conscious AI yet, as far as we know, from what I understand. But
capitalism is an AGI.
Well, that's the thing. Like the understanding of what an AI is sort of not in line with the science fiction idea of what an AI is, in terms of like neuromancer or something.
Whoa, like from William Gibson?
Yeah, that's a very dated idea of what an AI is. But what you do, I don't think neural networks necessarily need to be some sort of revolutionary actual human intelligence that can talk to you and come up with its own ideas like a human brain would, since we already have human brains, and human brains interface with technology already. So the AI, we are essentially part of the operating system of an AI. That is kind of what the theory is at the moment.
I feel like you have to teach the AI to build itself, otherwise it's just going to be a weird feedback loop, and all you'll have is hallucinations. But that's personal.
Yeah, I mean
it's not the opinion of the Memetic Rhetoric podcast.
Yeah, I mean our opinions don't really matter.
Nothing
anymore.
matters.
Nothing matters at all. But the idea behind cognitive security is how do you deal with the fact that you're surrounded by a massive amount of computational power that can, in theory, steer you any direction it wants because of how interconnected all of these different.
It's like a war not only for your attention span, but for like your brain and your dreams even.
Yeah.
Like, because what do you when you dream? You close your eyes, you sleep. You're processing. Your subconscious is processing everything you've done that day.
That's right.
And you don't even know that, like, all that stuff is drawn from things. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But one of the things is I was in about all this data that they have.
Yes.
Is there's things like the sentient world simulation where it's like DARPA doing some sort of simulation to kind of, they have all these data points.
Yep.
And they can kind of process things and patterns and trends before they happen, which is common. People love to predict things.
Right.
And it's almost kind of like, I've always kind of wondered, like, if you weren't just doing it for defense, if you weren't just like a marketer, or maybe if you were, and you weren't just trying to sell things to people, if you weren't part of the capitalist AGI heuristic machine thingy, what if you wanted to, like, computationally socially engineer someone's rehabilitation?
Okay, so you're talking about if you're talking about rehabilitation, you're talking about somebody who's in an undesirable position.
Like, let's say I'm like an abuser or like a murderer. Well, I guess murder is abuse sometimes, right? And we're like, I've had like a messed up childhood, and but you know, because of all the data you have on me, I have potential, I have skills, but you're not allowed to associate with me or give me a real job,
right? Because we're still dealing with like societal mores and ideas of ethics and, you know, what's right and wrong.
But you can condition me based off the other data points you can control.
Yes. To
change my behavior.
Yeah.
And make me more productive and help make you more money.
If I wanted to use an analogy, like just like operating systems or any sort of program have strong points, they have vulnerabilities. The human brain works the same. This is all sort of the same thing happening at once.
It's like a side channel attack for the human mind, man.
Yeah.
If I had a bong right now, I'd hit it and be like Cheech and Chong conspiracy sounding. But we're not doing that anymore.
No, we're not. We're not smoking weed anymore. We're talking about
real things,
sober, real thoughts.
Yes.
So if you wanted to, it just depends on what you're trying to do. Obviously, the main goal is profit because we are running capitalism, all of us, all the time. That's very difficult to escape. So part of cognitive security is like, you know, if we're all running capitalism, how do you deal with the fact that you are running capitalism and you're on your brain along with everybody else?
Very carefully.
And the other question is like, what else can you do with all of this? So cognitive security, like in the example of rehabilitation, how can you use somebody's data points to steer them? Well, I mean, it sounds like we're talking about manipulation or something like really bad.
Well, I feel like anytime someone uses the word social engineering,
it seems negative.
The first thing you're going to think of is something bad.
Yeah.
But when you do it, well, it's almost like there's a lot of things that could be bad. When we talk about capitalism, the way it works being bad.
Yeah.
This computational social engineering stuff would basically be optimizing a person.
Yes.
As part of that cog to make them productive, to give them, you know, make them make money for the system or whatever, however things work, you know, generate heat. Now, manipulation, yeah, but what isn't manipulation?
Yeah.
How do you not be manipulated? Like, how do you have your own thoughts? How do you know? If you stop caring, is that really the freedom that you want, or is it just falling out of the one thing that keeps you working?
Yeah, I mean, I could give a personal example
Oh, go ahead.
for the rehabilitation model. I mean, when I for like a few years I was living with somebody who had like severe mental health issues to the point of disability, and we only have one income because this person, she couldn't work. So I basically had this problem where this person was, they couldn't work, they needed help. I was attempting to help them just with money, but I couldn't just help them with money because Seattle's expensive and I can't make enough money. So um, the the goal I actually had or needed to have, if I wanted to continue to help them, was how can I make this person profitable? It's not what I want, but it's what we needed to do because the 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 cost problem is bigger than myself or her.
Mm-hmm.
So, but her mental health issues made her, very resistant to getting work or cooperating with me even. So for a long time during those years, it was a series of attempting to find ways to like look at the data points I was working with, like what can I actually do to suggest or nudge this person into uh, being able to help me make money so that we don't become homeless. And I mean, I completely failed because I'm not very good at it. But it was what I was trying to do was put something in front of them that they could utilize without them realizing that I was attempting to push it onto them.
And you know why it doesn't work? Because you don't have all the data.
Yeah, I was missing a lot of data. That's true. I was sort of, it was a contentious relationship, so it was difficult for me to actually penetrate into that person's mind in any meaningful way. We had trouble with communication, so I was missing the proper data to find out how to get that to work. But the process was
Do you
a
think
lot
that's
of,
manipulation?
well, yeah. I mean, we were sort of manipulating each other because her mental health issues were manipulating me into being sort of like a provider caretaker role for her.
Okay.
And I was attempting to manipulate her mental health issues towards like what could interlock with what didn't work with capitalism, like not being able to work. Um, sort of like I would put in front of her different possibilities for things that actually would get her what she wanted. Like you can do this to access these services. I mean, a lot. If it sounds like I'm just basically telling her call these numbers so you can access social services, it wasn't like that. She was very resistant to that idea. So I had to sort of frame access to social services or access to certain things in a specific way that exploited her data points. Like, one of the things that she would say was she had certain ideas about how society worked and how. Go ahead.
Listening.
Oh, okay. She had certain ideas about how society worked and how the past had been unfair to her in certain demographic ways, like the things you can list off about who she was. She's a woman, and like her race and that kind of thing. And it there were the idea of reparations, for example,
Yeah.
for past injustice in the United States. I was like, well, you know, I know that you're opposed to the idea of getting help from the state, but really it's a form of reparations because taxpayers are paying taxpayer money into the money that you would be getting if you signed up for SSI, for example. So in a sense, you're getting reparations through SSI. Is how I had to spin it in order for her to see it in a different way. It was manipulation, and it was an attempt to get her to start making money. And that's an example of what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it can be used for any sort of purpose. But what if it's being used against you? How do you protect yourself from that kind of thing?
Well, that's what I've always wondered, because like, there's people who've been told like Alice will believe anything, and because they're told that I could have high kind of security at a certain point, But if someone whispers into their ear, "Hey, let's go socially engineer Alice," and like lie to her and like say things, you eventually wear me down to where I can't tell anymore. Who's just nonsense in me? That's not a word. Who's
You made it a word.
It's a word now.
Yeah.
And who's not? And eventually you get worn down, and you can't think straight. You can't tell what's real, and you don't have a lot of and you're isolated, and you wear away until you can't tell like.
I think this is a common experience. I think almost most people experience this in one way or another. Yours is kind of unique because of your circumstances.
Do you skip ads on YouTube when you watch them, or do you watch the ads?
It really depends.
Because I watch all the ads, and it really like eventually puts all that thoughts. My mom always used to say, "Garbage in, garbage out." All right.
I've heard it before.
So, you're sitting here on YouTube all day, every day
Yeah.
during the pandemic and onwards, and etc.
Sure.
I'm sitting here all day, and you see the same ads, and you're like, I'm helping with data points by like letting the ads run. I don't know. I have it in my head that it helps someone if I watch the ads.
Okay.
Maybe the things you tell yourself to pass the day.
Sure.
And but eventually, it wears you down, and for some reason they decide you need to see this ad, and there's a whole bunch that you find really annoying, and then the one you don't find annoying sticks out more, and you think, well, maybe they do know what I want. They finally got me, and then you end up starting a business, and you don't know why. And
sure. What I would say is, like, no matter what you do, it's going to be measured in some way.
Yeah.
The first thing I would say is cognitive security in this environment that we've discussed with all of the data and all the measuring is almost literally impossible. However, I feel like you can condense your data points down to something more transparent or more opaque. That's the way I personally thought about it. Like, for example, okay, did you have a thought on that?
One of the things I learned about in class a long time ago.
Yeah.
So people really aren't all that different. When we did the classes, the sections on demographics and like actually going into some of the software.
Yeah.
And looking up demographics and like where people lived and who did what and the families and like who in cars, all the stuff, all the data on these people. And there's single families and this and that and the other.
Yes. There's
only like 20 different types of people in like a suburb.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a lot. Like, yeah, there's a lot of people, but like each city has its own cast of characters, and every city has an Alice, every city has a Mark. We all got the common struggle, and it's not that hard to kind of predict us at a certain point.
Yeah, there's different levels to it. I mean, when you're dealing with the amount of people that you're observing now, like the population sample, on the granular level, it doesn't really probably matter that much. On a certain level of granularity, what somebody's thinking or up to. You're talking more about trends, like human trends.
Well, especially once the pandemic happened, and it put a lot more people on the internet a lot longer.
Yes.
And then all the AI scraping. But we'll get to that in a second. But the pandemic happened, and they got a lot more data on a lot more people.
Yes, that's a fact.
Because the consumption, the devices, more data points happening because you're on your computers more, etc.
Yeah, more people offering up more data points.
You got a lot of training data there.
Yeah.
A lot.
I would say previous to the pandemic, less people on site on the internet, the more data, they were getting more data from people's like transactions and communications at work and that kind of thing. When people went home and they started working remotely, they're working with a lot more tools that collect their personal information on their computer, and nobody reads the terms of service. And the terms of service for almost every single thing you use on the computer, every single thing you use on your phone, says, yes, you can harvest everything I'm doing.
Yeah, that's a given. On the Meta AI chatbots today on Instagram, they made me. I actually looked through the terms of service, and I was like, we might sell your data to third parties. We might change who we're selling it to. This is telling you,
right?
This is normal.
Like, I think a few years ago, especially maybe in the last like 10, 15 years, This was heavily discussed, like the ethics of it, but we're way past that now. It's just reality. Yeah.
There's all sorts of data leaks happening all the time.
Yeah.
And then you get like a settlement for it or something later. And it's just this weird sort of like everybody has everything. And if everybody knows everything, and then we have these predictive models.
Yeah.
And you have these simulations that can like kind of predict the world 2 days in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when we throw in AI, neural networks, and you have all these models, and you have quantum computers that can accelerate these things.
Yeah.
To the nth degree.
Yes.
And do you think free will, like, is when I read about a lot of this technology that happens and the data and how you can use it on people combined with what I know about advertising and like government stuff, it's like I question whether or not we have free will. It's nice to believe that my choices are my own, but from like a semantic sort of, not semantic, but like from pure like symbolic standpoint.
Sure.
Like all the things I see, all the things I consume, all the things that I put my eyes on, comes from somewhere.
Sure.
And you can only make your own decisions so much before you've. It goes back to the AI copyright thing.
Mm-hmm.
The image that I produced.
I understand.
With this prompt.
I understand what you're saying.
There was a number there that was going to make sure it popped out that way with those words.
So your question is just like, are you asking if human will exist or if it matters?
Either.
Okay.
Obviously, it's a podcast. We can explore things, honey. Okay?
Sure. My answers would be that I don't know if human will exist, and I don't think it matters.
Are you Calvinist?
I don't know because I haven't read enough Calvin. But what I feel like we're dealing with, I think this has always been true, especially like the more that I read or listen to about the grand scope of human history, that what we're talking about is computation power applied to what I would think of as, or what I would call human meteorology. Mm-hmm. Meteorology is like a science or a field that's often people make fun of, because people trying to predict the weather, and they say it's going to be rainy, but it's actually sunny, But meteorology is a field where they do a vast amount of guesswork based off a vast amount of observations and assumptions and trends and through the whole history of meteorology and the way the weather works. And
it's kind of like me with the asteroids at home thing.
Yes.
Like I sit here with my GPU all day on Boink.
Yeah.
Running asteroids at home with my graphics card scanning images of outer space from some telescope.
Yeah.
Looking for what's coming to Earth and when and where.
Yeah.
And how fast.
Sure.
And it can get stuff wrong, but also, like, it's usually not very wrong.
Right. It's a lot of these things are too big for us to really know. But I mean, I would say that the question I would pose is like, does the wind or does weather have free will? Like, I think a lot of people would say no because it's not conscious, but it is a system that's constantly in motion, and it's possible to predict, but it's impossible to 100% predict.
What's that theory? The conscious. I don't remember the exact name of it. Field consciousness theory.
Maybe.
Where every person is like a electromagnetic composition of its, their own data point on
Correct.
Like a
sure.
electromagnetic whatever, we're all a bunch of electricity and
yes.
happening in a very specific way.
That's right.
Well, the wind has its own atoms and it's moving. At the end of the day, we're all just atoms and
correct.
A superposition of matter.
Yeah.
In some sort of sense.
That's right.
And because I can talk, because we've decided that this is talking, and because the things coming out of my mouth are words, that I have consciousness, and that the monkey rescuing a orphan at the zoo is smart because it can rescue a person. It must be conscious.
It can make judgment calls or something like that. Like, sure.
But we weren't always this way.
That's correct.
Evolution happened.
Mm-hmm.
Organic training happened.
That's correct.
And, like, who's this? Oh, this is dark.
Okay.
Who's to say, like, a rock doesn't. This is bad. Okay, who's to say, like, a rock doesn't have some kind of consciousness, too?
Yeah.
Because I mean, or at least, like,
it's not bad.
What is memory not memory, what's the saying? Like, is consciousness a inherent property of matter or something? Or is it some other saying?
I'm not familiar with it, but it sounds like a good question.
Yeah, a lot of things I say sound good, but are just nonsense. But
it's all right.
But the point is like, where does it stop? Where does it start? Who cares? Should I care?
Right. Well, I think as it pertains to security, since that was the topic.
Oh yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. What I was saying was that you're saying that there's a sort of limited number of archetypes or human trends. And actually, you can condense it down pretty well to a limited number of types of people in terms of how predictable they are. That's what you learned when you were studying. And what I wanted to do is kind of bring it back to what you're talking about, the YouTube videos. Like, I think everybody is predictable. I don't think you can really argue with that. But the way
Fight me.
Well, the way in which you're predictable, probably you do have some impact on what type of person you are. And also, like, for example, with the YouTube videos, sometimes, like, this, I don't know if it's just sort of a sense of security or a sense of protecting myself, but in general, with how I interact with the internet, when I'm conscious of it, sometimes I will lean into capitalism and I'll watch the entire video. And sometimes I'll lean out of capitalism and I'll skip the video, because both of those things lead to the same. Both of those things say something about me. It's more data.
I think a lot of it has to do with one's capacity to adapt to new information.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. The only part of having cognition that feels like you have free will is the fact that you can change your mind, or that you can behave contrary to how you were behaving before. So,
let's say I was doing one of these, like, simulations where I'm doing predictive models days in advance. And I came up to you and said, tomorrow, you're going to, well, what's a good one? Let's say let's say I'm doing a giant prank on you with a bunch of my friends. It's like a performance art where we all secretly laugh at you behind your back.
Yeah.
We invite you out to play a noise show.
Yeah.
And we know you have a very long XLR cable.
Yeah.
And we know that you're kind of out of it and not paying attention.
Yep.
Because you've been bombarded with ads and whatever, and you're kind of out of it.
Yeah.
And we know that humor and laughing at someone motivates people to generate more heat, and it contributes to the economy because it gives them something to talk about it.
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
And so we're like, well, if you go to this show, we're going to try to sabotage you. Someone's going to try to make you fall over, and if you let them, they'll generate enough money and will let you live. But if you decide you don't want to be embarrassed, we're going to kill you.
That's pretty severe.
We have to leave an impression.
Yes.
So that you remember that you only have two choices.
Right.
Now, you're told you have to either fall and get everyone to laugh and embarrass yourself, or try to perform.
Right.
And you're sitting there unable to perform because you're paralyzed by fear. And then you realize, I have bad cognitive security because I let this choice matrix affect my decision making.
That's a really good example, actually. Because they've distilled it down to a binary system of, like, escape, like complicity or death. And the fear you're experiencing is because they figure your security is not in good shape because the illusion of only having that binary choice has paralyzed you into considering it as the only two options out, or that the situation is even real to begin with. That's what you're talking about being worn down. When someone's cognitive security, I mean, the more you're worn down by way too much stuff to think about,
Well, it's like
the worse it gets.
It's like the person would know. So in this purely hypothetical narrative I'm
Yes,
spinning,
I understand.
the person would know that you're the type of person who would probably because you're at this point in your life where you're not paying attention, and you would probably fall or at least get wrapped around your long ass XLR cable like anyone would.
Sure.
But we'll frame it to you in this way.
Yeah.
To where you'll think about it this way, and then you'll behave this way.
Yeah.
And we know that when given two choices, we know you're going to go the easy route because you don't want to die.
Most people don't want to die. It's true.
And then you'll be thinking for the rest of your life, what if I had done the other thing?
Yes.
And then if we do another series of choices, you keep going down this path of feeling like you don't have any agency.
Yeah. And you can imagine this on, like, as a hypothetical, you can imagine this happening this essentially, this sort of choice is posed to pretty much everybody every single day.
Right.
The system that we work in, or like if you're talking about the capital as the system we're running with all our collective brains, is often giving you like very severe choices between death and complicity. It's just a really good example, basically, of pretty much the choices everybody's dealing with all the time. And even if like in the capitalist system, if you have a lot of money, you're still posed with this question, because the people who have like a fantastic amount of money, they still essentially have to deal with that same question, but it's just a different set of priorities.
They get nudged less and worn down less.
Oh, they do, because they're under less pressure.
But they get like real people coming up trying to like take all their money from them. Though.
Yeah, that's one of the problems that like somebody who has a fantastic amount of wealth has to deal with. It's a lot more abstract sort of life and death choices that we're faced with.
With capitalism, the thing is you have to keep everyone spending all the time forever.
Correct.
And then find some way in the middle of all that to be like, we should create something new. Yeah. And make a new industry and figure out how to not destroy everything else in the process.
I would say this is probably going to be sort of the way that we conclude where we're headed. Because ultimately, I think we both agree that we exist in that system, the capitalist AI system. That sort of, we operate off of that assumption, right? You and I?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not I don't like being called a capitalist, but no. I'm complicit in the systems around me, whether I like it or not.
We're not talking about ideology. We're literally talking about ourselves as automata.
Correct.
Right. So I was speaking with my roommate who I'm living with now. She was talking about how, people who are fantastically wealthy in the capitalist consciousness AI system, they essentially use a barter system rather than actual
favor based, right?
Yeah, I mean at the highest levels of privilege and the cognition of capitalism, you're essentially just shifting around abstract figures, ideas, position, and concepts of power.
Well, because that's why the 1% stuff is kind of weird. They don't understand that because they don't have to deal with the money. The money is literally just a number.
Correct.
It's when people say stuff like crypto's for money laundering or whatever. Well, everything is for money laundering.
That is also correct.
Because you have to put a price on stuff for the government to be happy.
Yeah, I mean every business is essentially a money laundering function,
right? Within
capitalism, money is laundered from resource nodes through the whole supply chain to the business to the consumer. That crypto stuff is no different than another reflection of the same process. It's the same thing happening. So it's not any people who are doing crypto stuff and people say, oh, it's all just for money laundering. It's really no different than just buying Cheez-Its or something.
As I understand it, crypto is mostly a giant collection of data points
Yeah.
for the data points we're not allowed to talk about.
Yeah, I mean,
It's like a giant abstraction.
because it is
yet another sort of moving ideas around. Anyway, yeah.
Crypto itself is pretty security focused. I think that's why it kind of stands out in that way, because a lot of it's like you're not supposed to know. The encryption is kind of what defines it, isn't that right?
I mean, they make it so that when you send money, you can't accidentally double spend or accidentally reverse it without a lot of computational power.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of like using all that computational power as a form of like security and regulation.
Right. So, like, let's say if I ran like a data center versus like, I'm like, well, I can't read. I have a bigger data center than you.
Yeah.
So you can't like scam me because, or do a chargeback.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is how our decentralized network works. You can't brute force it.
Right.
Or whatever.
Yeah, so since the topic is security, is there, I mean, do you think that there is any functional way to protect yourself from being the wind? If we're talking about like human meteorology, from just being sort of blown around by everything.
Not to get too Taoist on you here, but I think you have to be the water.
No, I'm happy with Taoist. That's
well,
you know,
well, I mean, like in Tao and like that sort of thing, it's fluid. They want you to be fluid, right?
Yeah.
And the wind is a kind of a fluid.
It is
motion, at least.
Yeah. And breath is a big part of Taoism.
And I'm not very familiar with Taoism.
You're doing great. So
far. But I do know that like if you want to enjoy your life,
yes,
you can't be worried about certain things. You have to go with the flow.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just doomed to be trapped in someone else's narrative.
I think what you're talking about is that like I think the answer is no. Personally, you can't help yourself from being buff. You know, sort of like.
Well, I think you can change how you view it. I don't think you can get away from it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that and a good example would be like, because social media is very dominant and we talk about it a lot, like one of the common pitfalls of social media is falling into a framework that you're not even aware exists and that you're a part of, where it feels like you're not being manipulated. Like the manipulation is that you don't feel like you're being manipulated. It's sort of like the people have an account and they feel like, you know, on my account I say whatever I want and I speak truth to power, or I go against the grain of this particular field of politics, but it's really, they're a perfect example of exactly what they were anticipated to be, or you can pigeonhole them quite easily.
Have you ever been to a website called Slate Star Codex and read the Meditations on Moloch?
No, I've never done so.
Have you heard of this at all?
I've heard of Moloch, but I haven't heard.
He's like he lies to people, telling them that if you want to have Moloch is the guy that is like, if you want to have a productive harvest next year, you got to sacrifice your kids to me.
This I am familiar with, the child sacrifice to Moloch.
And there's this idea that you can computationally. It's basically like the postmodern view of it is that Moloch is basically the god of optimization.
Yeah,
and it comes at a price. Optimization comes at a price, a human price, and we're like, well, how do we fight against this sort of like optimization thing? And the thing you were talking about, that's optimization happening.
Correct.
The ads and the everything and the like not knowing you're being manipulated. It's like when you optimize social media to generate as many views as possible, you want it to feel I'm doing air quotes right now, organic.
Correct.
You want to have a good time, air quotes again.
Yes.
And it's not at all.
Correct.
It's simulated. So the question is, at the end of the day, are you okay with the fact that everything is being simulated? And not talking about like the simulation theory where like the existence is all a simulation, but like actual computational, like every experience you have is potentially like simulated somewhere already.
Being used as part of models on servers.
Right.
Yeah. Like, the question is, are you okay with that?
Like, do you think that you're still even you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I often don't feel like I'm me at all.
Or you're just a process.
I usually feel like I am just a process.
You are.
That might have just been because of traumatic experiences.
Oh yeah, blame your trauma.
But that is one of the funnier things you've ever said. But I think one of the first steps to cognitive security in this environment is to Taoism is a really good example. Is to first of all to embrace the fact that you're simulated, predictable, and manipulated. This basically first you need to be in. You need to synchronize with what you're dealing with, because part of the problem of being manipulated is that in this way is that rebellion is already been factored in, or any attempt to resist being manipulated by a system that is so big and so much bigger than you that you can't even see that you're in it. So first you have to accept it, that you are.
This is why I tell people that crime is fake.
Well, yeah, like basically you have to accept that you're weak and manipulatable and malleable in order to. Essentially, it's the sort of the old precept: you need to know the rules of the game before you can break them. You need to cooperate.
Now, I think that I might not like that this is a thing, but it's also kind of the only way. I don't know if it's the only way, but I feel like it's one of the major ways we could achieve like a post-scarcity society.
Sure.
Like a sort of a simulated UBI where labor goes in, money comes out. Maybe you don't even have property or whatever, but the flow keeps happening.
Yeah.
And you're taken care of, and you don't realize that it's not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
Like your hard work, your feeling of accomplishment would go away, and that would hurt some people.
It would.
It might traumatize others.
Could.
I don't know.
No, I do see. I mean, a lot of the arguments against UBI and like what people call the nanny state is that it essentially like it's sort of like some sort of anti-vitalist thing where it renders you impotent and like there's nothing to fight for anymore. There's no conflict or grist.
Well, being on SSI has given me a lot of thought because it's kind of like it's not the same thing.
It's the closest thing we have, though.
But it's the closest thing.
Like almost literally.
To where so I'm like, well, I'm like beta test. I feel like in my head I tell myself I'm beta testing UBI.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, air quotes. Don't tell the feds I said this, but I always have wanted to work, but I haven't been able to do it.
Yes.
But I want to.
Understood.
And I feel like computationally speaking, with your simulations, you'd find something for me to do. And maybe I am. And maybe I think it's my idea. Definitely, that's probably how it works. But
yeah,
one of the things about a lot of this is not to get too personal. This is kind of why I went into noise music.
Sure.
Because back in the MySpace days, we had like these like penguins scare me, lol so random banana people.
Oh yeah.
And they would be like, I would be that asshole who had, I knew enough about computers to know there was no such thing as random.
Right.
But I also wanted to be like, with my art, how can we actually make things random?
Yes.
Like truly random. And when I first found out about like John Cage and stuff, like aleatoric stuff, like he would have cut fabric and let it drop onto the canvas wherever.
Yep.
And that's another, like the wind would carry the, I guess. So
sure.
maybe I'm due to watch Dr. Strangelove again.
Yeah, it's a good movie. And what you're saying about noise is, I mean, I think what I'm trying to get across is like first you accept that you can be predicted, and acceptance that you are predictable, and then you can go from there. Actually, I think just accepting that you're utterly predictable is for the first level of cognitive security, because they don't really want people to believe that. Like, if you're trying to manipulate somebody, you don't really want them to believe that they're being manipulated.
Because the first thing that someone will tell you when you tell them that they don't have free will is like, yeah, I do.
Yeah, because you can make decisions or whatever. But, like, accepting that you don't have free will is... I mean, it's sort of a contradiction in terms, because you think I'm deciding to say I don't have free will. But, like, I mean, that's why I've always said it doesn't matter. Like, I sort of relinquish the question, which is in and of itself sort of making the point that no, I don't think there is such a thing as free will. As I cede the question. It's irrelevant if free will exists or not. So that's sort of my starting point for that entire thought process. So if you want to protect your brain, I think the first step is to find a position of weakness within a massively oppressive consciousness that you're just a tiny little grainy little weak thing that's getting blown around left and right. So accept that's happening. And that's, I think, itself pretty liberating. And then you can start to look at how to actually protect yourself from specific aspects of that sort of like human meteorology.
Accept your mortality.
Yeah. That's,
or well, unless you're building immortality, which is different.
That is different.
And I'm fine with that, I guess, maybe.
Sure.
But, yeah.
I also wanted to say that if this is I think the other point I would make is like cybersecurity. Like, if you work in cybersecurity, you're probably conscious of just how like weak all software is. You probably feel like pretty weak using almost goddamn near anything. You just have to accept that if you work with those tools.
You know, my dad told me at his job at the NSA they wouldn't let him have passwords over a certain character length.
Right. Yeah, like exactly. Like the longer the password, it seems like the safer it would be, but it's...
They don't want you to be locked out.
Exactly.
Forever.
They want you to have access.
They want to be able to crack it if you do actually lose your password.
And, like, so what I wanted to say, I mean, as like a conclusion sort of point is, if this like advice or how to protect yourself sounds useless, I think it is. I think it's on a certain level, it's kind of impossible to actually protect your cognition. But I think, first of all, accepting that you have very little security in the grand scheme of things is good, because then you have at least somewhere, you have a point that you can start to operate from. And the second thing, I've forgotten, even though it was just in my brain, and now I'm pissed off about it.
Maybe they took it from you.
I think they did. I think they made me forget.
Yeah.
Using the radio waves from the computer screen, because
that's
how computer
bollocks.
screens work.
No, there's people in the apartments nearby doing the sound weapons.
Are you schizophosing?
Am I?
Now? Are you
I might be a little
at me right now on the podcast?
Okay, so one time I did shrooms, and someone did that to me while I was on shrooms. I've always wanted to do it to someone. Back, because revenge is like real ethical.
Well, I wish I was on shrooms right now, but I'm not.
Yeah, I'm pretending that you're a giant fungus because I feel infected.
I am a giant
when you're
fungus.
Around.
That I feel like a giant fungus right now.
Okay, well, we should. Do you have any closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts. Well, I kind of already said them, but cognitive security, I think, is largely an illusion. But on a microscopic level, you can, I think, basically make predictive models have to work extra hard to figure out who the fuck you are, and that's fun. It's something you can do until you die.
I just think that if you're alive, it's because the data wills it. If you didn't have value, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And if you do die, it's to make other people have more value.
Yeah, it's pretty cutthroat. But it's been that way for all of human history, so it's not like we're living in any sort of like super unique special period of, being alive. It's just there's a lot to think about these days, more than God. And
someone in the local kink community once said to me before he got canceled, try to have fun while you can.
I think those are some good words to end the podcast with. Try to have fun while you can.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm Mark.
I'm Alice.
And this has been the...
This has been the Memetic Rhetoric podcast. We're cutting this out. We don't do the names at the end.
This has been...
No, we do now.
What?
You gotta say your Bandcamp again. I gotta say, hey, come to prompt fuck, bro.
Okay.
Promptress.ai.
Go
I
to-
got like nothing cool on there. It's all cringe, but cringe is king now.
Go
So.
to
Mark, what's up?
Go to promptress.ai, and then my album Perversity of Kindness by Meth and June is at deadiverson.bandcamp
.songtrader.com.
It's on my Bandcamp. Just go listen to it. It's actually pretty good.
It'll be in the doobly doo.
It'll be in the what the fuck is that?
Shut up.
Oh god. I'm gonna go blow my brains out.
I can't say it on WB Network.
Yeah, I don't have any benefits to lose, so I can say I'm gonna go shoot myself.
Yeah, well. The point is, thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening.